Okay, so we're on to that fourth step of writing, a little closer look. You should feel pretty good by this point because you know what you're writing about, you've got a plan, and you've got a rough draft. So we are getting closer to the finish line, so you've got to feel good about that. So let's look at strategies for revising. Since students sometimes have a hard time knowing what the difference is between revising and editing and proofreading, let's look at this a little more carefully. What is revising? Revising is when you are making your paper sound better. This is all about putting sentences together, combining sentences to make things flow, putting in transition words that will help you understand or your reader to understand a little better. It's a combination of having short and long sentences so that things flow very well. Also, this is where you're going to pick up some of your grammar errors. So I have some strategies that will help you with this. So let's just look at them. First and most important, to raise your level of writing, you don't want sentences in the paragraph to have the same duplicate beginning sentence words. Not the same repeated words, but the same beginning sentence words. So first of all, when you make any changes, go to the beginning or a couple of sentences before to read the flow to make sure you do it. And I want you to notice you are not concentrating on spelling, punctuation, or specific grammar in this point. We'll get to that when you edit and proofread. So that should take the stress level down significantly when you do this. So first, go through and highlight or circle all those words at the beginning of the sentences that are duplicated. In other words, I's, thes, whatever your subject material is, a lot of times you're going to have started that sentence. Remember when we made our sentences, when we were doing our rough draft, we were not worried if they were short, if they were choppy, if we were starting with the same words. So this is where we put things together and make them a little bit better. After we've selected those duplicate beginning words, we're going to use several strategies to eliminate them. And you know most of these already. We can first start by changing the beginning word to another sentence. The beginning word in the sentence, and you can do that a couple of ways. If I'm talking about Michael Jordan, I can call Michael Jordan Michael. I can call him Jordan. I can call him Mr. Jordan. I could call him Mr. Basketball. I could call him the player. Any different names I can come up for Michael, I could start a sentence with that. The other thing is just to do an introductory word. And remember, on your sheet of gold, you have a lot of those words that we can use at the beginning of a sentence, like also or next, however, in fact, as long as it makes sense. Also, if we want to make a sentence that has a dependent clause and an independent clause, we can start with a word like after or all those. So you have a lot of different choices to use here when you're trying to reword the beginning of that sentence. So here's an example. We've gone through, let's make this a little bigger for you so that it's a little easier to read. Here we go. This is going to be much better. All right. We were doing the one on cancer, watching our father die. This is an example of step 4. We have gone through, we have began this sentence with it, this sentence with it, this sentence with you, and this sentence with you. So we wanted to do something different to either put them together or to change the wording. So on this one, what did we do? We just left this it because we can certainly have one of them. And on this one, oh my goodness, look, the medicines seem endless, and we added the fanboy and, comma, and you were unable to do so much less. So in other words, we put two complete thoughts together with that comma and the fanboy to make it read a little more clearly. On the you, we left this you, and I'm not sure, something doesn't look right. Oh, I see. The medicine seemed endless, comma, and you're able to do so much less. So in other words, we also did a combined sentence with that one to get rid of the you. All right, seemed like we had an it too. And the other it, a comma, and the fanboy, and it takes. So in other words, we used our sheet of gold. Instead of using an introductory word, we used one of our fanboys. And remember, we take two complete thoughts, we put them together with a comma and one of the fanboys. So we used and in both of those cases. So it raised the level of our writing significantly. And I want to go back to here. So what did we do? We actually did not change them to another word. We actually combined them together with a comma and a fanboy, but we can certainly use an introductory word. We can put two sentences together just with a semicolon, but we don't want to do that as often because we don't have that transition. We can do the semicolon and the conjunctive adverb. In other words, one of these words, these transition words that we were looking at, okay? Not the ones on the right-hand side of your sheet of gold. Why? Because those are a dependent and an independent clause, and you put them together a little differently. But if I'm putting two thoughts together, and I'm not using one of the fanboys, I'm going to use a semicolon, I'm going to use one of those transition words, and then the comma. And again, don't forget, we can take any of these words as long as it makes sense. Remember, first rule of reading and writing, use common sense. So we can take one of these words and start a sentence that way as well. So let's look at the changes we made again. We got rid of this it by doing the comma and the fanboy, and we got rid of this you by doing the comma and the fanboy. So what I want you to see is, even if you don't understand everything else, that if you get this one option, remember I've asked you only to memorize 3 things in this class: your SQ3R, your fanboys, and your 5 steps of writing. So by using the fanboys, even if you're not using the others, you can significantly change the level of your writing. So that's just getting rid of the duplicate beginning sentence words. So what else do we want to do? Well, we want to make sure that we have a combination of simple and complex sentences. And as you get rid of those duplicate beginning sentence words and you're putting thoughts together, you're going to do that pretty easily. But I also want to read my paper out loud to myself, because if it seems disorganized to me, or if you read it out loud to somebody else and it sounds disorganized to them, or something doesn't make sense, you need to change it to make sure it makes sense, okay? And don't forget, your classmates, other people that you know, are a great resource for this. And this is the most important thing I can tell you. When you finish doing your revisions for your rough draft, put it down. Ideally overnight would be best, but I know you're going to run late. You're like me, we're going to put it off to the last minute. So at least go get a snack or a cup of coffee or something, because a lot of times when you finish those revisions, you think, oh, I've got this made and my paper's ready. Well, it's organized well. You may make it sound better, but we still have the editing and proofreading to do that we need to do separately.